And away we go, episode 1267 of the Al Galdi podcast. It is Tuesday, February 24th, 2026. It is the day of press conferences for Washington Commanders general manager Adam Peters and Washington Commanders head coach Dan Quinn at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Peters, Tuesday at noon. Quinn, Tuesday afternoon at 3. Will they say groundbreaking, earth-shattering, seismic things? Maybe not. But will Peters and Quinn say some interesting things? Probably so. On Wednesday's show, we'll have in-depth coverage of whatever they say, as never forget, this is the podcast on which we talk Commanders on every show, no matter the time of year. And this is a podcast for which there is a new episode each weekday, Monday through Friday, with each episode out by 5 a.m. Eastern. Hello and welcome to this Tuesday installment of the Al Galdi podcast. We on this episode of the podcast have not one but two guests for you. Next segment, a conversation for a second consecutive show with Ohio State football insider Doug Lesmerises of Bill and Doug on Ohio State football on Substack. Doug also is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show podcast, which has more than 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. Doug has covered Ohio State football since 2005, and the next segment is going to give us tremendous insight on Ohio State receiver Carnell Tate as a potential target for the Commanders with their number 7 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, as we, during this Combine week, are especially focusing on what our team should/will do with that number 7 overall pick. You know, ESPN Fantasy Football and NFL Draft analyst Phil Yates, he in his latest mock draft has the Commanders at 7, taking Carnell Tate, who, per the Pro Football Focus big board for the draft, is the number 1 receiver in the draft. Imagine the Commanders next season with an all-Ohio State top 2 at receiver of Terry McLaurin and Carnell Tate, and not necessarily in that order. How would that look with Jaden Daniels as QB1? Doug Lesmerises, next segment, with a deep dive on Carnell Tate, who personally I am very open to the Commanders taking at 7. And then after a conversation with Doug, we'll speak with Peter Hassett, co-founder of the outstanding Washington Capitals site Russian Machine Never Breaks, RMNB. With Peter, we'll get in-depth analysis of our Caps as they get set to begin their post-Olympics break portion of the NHL's 2025-2026 regular season, in which the Caps have been rather up and down. With Peter, we'll discuss whether the Caps this season are good, why their special teams have been so bad for so much of this season, what to make of the team's 5-on-5 play this season, how winger Alex Ovechkin is doing this season, whether Peter is surprised by how well goaltender Logan Thompson is doing this season, which players on the Caps most need to step up, how the Caps should approach the 2026 NHL Trade Deadline, and more. Before we get to feedback, some Commanders news on Monday afternoon. Reports on Monday afternoon that Commanders tackle/guard Andrew Wylie has agreed on a 2-year contract extension, keeping him from becoming an unrestricted free agent this offseason, as he had been set to be. This is a reported 2-year, $7.5 million contract extension. That is a nothing extension, totally worth it for a depth piece in Wylie. Also, Commanders assistant head coach/offensive pass game coordinator Brian Johnson now is gone. The Los Angeles Rams on Monday afternoon announced their 2026 coaching staff. It includes 2 guys who spent the last 2 seasons with the Commanders. Cliff Kingsbury, who spent the last 2 seasons as the Commanders' offensive coordinator. He now is the Rams' assistant head coach. We, on February 6th, had reports that Kingsbury was joining the Rams. And Brian Johnson, who spent the last 2 seasons as the Commanders' assistant head coach/offensive pass game coordinator. He now is the Rams' senior offensive assistant. We did not know that he was leaving, but he now is gone. So more change for the Commanders' coaching staff. And also on Monday afternoon was the New England Patriots announcing that they have released former Washington running back Antonio Gibson. He in March 2024 left the Commanders and signed with the Pats as an unrestricted free agent. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Email from Redskins fan on the Commanders QB2 for the last 2 seasons, Marcus Mariota, who is set to be an unrestricted free agent this offseason, writes Redskins fan. Hope you and your family are good, Al. Marcus Mariota would be a starting quarterback if he would just stop turning the ball over in high-pressure situations. It's like he's intentionally sabotaging himself. He plays lights out, and then at the worst possible moment makes a critical mistake. He seems like a great guy and a good player, just can't get out of his own way. He would be great on a run-heavy team. That would limit him feeling like he has to save the day. I feel bad for him that he hasn't been more successful. If he's smart, he'll sign a contract extension with us. I think he likes playing for us. Thank you for the email, Redskins fan. I hope that the Commanders re-sign Marcus Mariota. He, over the last 2 seasons, has been a very good QB2 for our team. And, if the Commanders do re-sign Marcus Mariota, that would mark him signing with the team for a 3rd consecutive offseason. He, in March 2024, signed with the team as an unrestricted free agent. He, in March 2025, re-signed with the team as an unrestricted free agent. Now, he last March did admit that he wanted to see what else was out there. He wants to be a starting quarterback again. I don't blame him. Who could blame him? He, as a bridge quarterback, while a team develops a younger quarterback, could make sense. But there are several things working in the Commanders' favor when it comes to re-signing Marcus Mariota. He is familiar with the Commanders. He likes being on the team. He's comfortable being on the team. Those 3 things are abundantly clear. Also, a thought had been that Mariota might follow the team's offensive coordinator for the last 2 seasons, Cliff Kingsbury, wherever he went. But Kingsbury has joined the Los Angeles Rams, but not as the offensive play caller. So it's not like Kingsbury's offense, in which Mariota did well over the last 2 seasons, is now going to be in effect somewhere else. Email from Jim Johnson on our conversation on last Tuesday's show, episode 1262, with Dan Steinberg, who now is an NFL managing editor for The Athletic, of having worked for the Washington Post from September 2001 to July 2025. We, with Dan, examined the state of being a Washington, D.C. area sports fan, both in terms of the teams and the media landscape, especially off the Washington Post, essentially shutting down its sports section. Writes Jim, "Hi Al, greetings. I hope that all is well with you and your family. I just wanted to let you know that your discussion with Dan Steinberg at episode 1262 was really interesting. Thanks for taking the time to include that conversation in the show. It is good to know that some people are not only looking back to the good old days, but also are looking forward to the future. Whatever the DC sports media ecosphere morphs into, I hope that you are still leading the way. Stay safe and well. Cheers, Jim Johnson." Thank you very much for that email, Jim. Well, what I wanted to do with that conversation with Dan Steinberg were 2 things in particular. A, focus the conversation on what's next instead of lamenting what was, including with the Washington Post sports section. And B, focus the conversation on the experience of the fan, of the consumer, rather than focus on the experience of the media member. As I said to Dan, the people who most enjoy hearing about the media are, wait for it, people in the media. No group of people loves hearing about itself more than our group, okay? It's like the great exchange in the great movie Anchorman, the legend of Ron Burgundy. Will Ferrell talking with Christina Applegate. "I'm kind of a big deal."
Do you know who I am?
No, I can't say that I do.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Really?
People know me.
Yeah, I'm kind of a big deal. That's how many, if not most, media members feel our egos are out of control. Hey, please consider subscribing to this podcast if you're not already doing that. Subscribing to the podcast costs nothing. Make sure that you never miss an episode and helps out the podcast a lot. And if you are already subscribing, thank you. So mock 2026 NFL drafts have been all over the place with what the Washington Commanders will do with their number 7 overall pick in the 2026 NFL draft. But a lot of the mocks are having the Commanders take one of 4 players out of Ohio State. Those 4 players, safety Caleb Downs, linebackers Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles, and receiver Carnell Tate. Heck, A good friend of this podcast, Pro Football Focus data analyst Dalton Wasserman. He on Monday morning came out with a mock draft on PFF.com, and he in the mock had the Commanders at 7 taking Sonny Styles. ESPN Fantasy Football and NFL draft analyst Field Yates. He in a February 12th installment of the First Draft podcast with ESPN NFL draft analyst Mel Kiper Jr. did a mock draft in which Yates had the Commanders at 7 taking Carnell Tate. Here was the discussion between Yates and Kiper.
And with the 7th pick in my mock draft 3.0, the Washington Commanders select Carnell Tate, wide receiver from Ohio State. So Mel, you can just repeat all the nice things you said about him a moment ago because he goes to D.C.
Yeah, Terry McLaurin's there, former Buckeye, and obviously Jane Daniels going to bounce back, and you would hope have a big year after having the injuries this year. The debate I would have here is edge rusher, pass rusher like a Reuben Bain Jr., okay? And you think about where we are right now with Washington in terms of the wide receiver position. It's a need area. So is running back. You could bring a Jeremiah Love in there. They got some guys that could be, remember Tyler Algier was in Atlanta. They drafted Bijan Robinson. They have some guys who are serviceable running backs, decent, but Jeremiah Love could be spectacular and special and is a wide receiver playing running back, slot receiver playing running back as well. So for Jane Daniels, want to get the all-around weapon in Love? Do you want to get a pass rusher like Reuben Bain Jr. or Field? I'll throw this in there. We talked about Arizona sitting there, maybe a little rich at offensive tackle. Would Arizona move off of 3 down to 7, allow Washington to go up and get David Bailey? Okay, and then they could drop down to 7 and get Fano or Malinois, whoever's there at 7. Okay, that'll be interesting to see. And Reuben Bain Jr. still on the board here. Jeremiah Love on the board. I'm a big Carnell Tate guy. I get it, but that would be a real debate in that room to see. Okay, do we take the pass rusher, the running back, or the wide receiver if they're all there? And obviously 2 of those 3 will be. That'll be an interesting discussion going on with Washington on draft day if that happens.
I want to address your hypothetical before I get back to the Commanders here, because if the Cardinals were looking to move down from 3 and the Commanders said we'll move up, like I feel like the Cardinals should make that deal right away, right? Because this is a year where we acknowledge that like the blue chip talent at the very top, a little bit lower in terms of quantity compared to where it has been in prior years. I'm not saying there will be no trades at the very top of the draft here, Mel, but I just feel like there aren't as many guys where you say to yourself, it's worth mortgaging whatever draft capital it'll require to get up, as compared to prior years where we had 6 quarterbacks going in the top 12 and the Giants were trying to move up and the Vikings were trying to move up and teams were motivated to move up for a guy in that quarterback group during that 2024 class. We'll see about that this year. But for the Commanders, beyond Terry McLaurin, Deebo Samuel, their number 2 wide receiver, getting up there in age, injury concerns, not currently under contract for next year. They were playing guys off the practice squad this past season. Definitely got tested with their depth due to injury. Obviously, McLaurin missing a bunch of time this past year as well. I think Carnell Tate, Mel, is on the short list, if not the most pro-ready prospect in the class. This guy is just a professional route runner, excellent body control, great on some of those sideline routes and sideline catches, a vertical threat with over 17 yards per catch this past season. He is ready to rock.
All right. There, of course, are so many ways that the Commanders could go with their number 7 overall pick. My draft philosophy is best player available, BPA. I am very anti-drafting for need. Drafting for need gets a team in trouble because a team's needs are ever-changing. So I want the Commanders at 7 taking the best player available if the Commanders cannot trade down and add to their inventory of draft capital. That is what I most want, the Commanders to trade down and add to their inventory of draft capital. But I don't know how realistic them doing that is. But, when you look at our team, it has so many needs that chances are whoever the Commanders take at 7, if in fact they stick and pick at 7, will be addressing a need. But make no mistake, receiver is a need for the Commanders, and Carnell Tate is a stud. We welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast, Ohio State football insider Doug Lesmerises of Bill and Doug on Ohio State football on Substack. Doug also is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show podcast, which has more than 8,000 subscribers on YouTube. Doug has covered Ohio State football since 2005. You can follow Doug on X at Doug Lesmerises, which is spelled Lesmerises. Doug joined us on Monday's show, episode 1200 66, on which he gave us great insight on 4 highly touted Ohio State defensive prospects in the 2026 NFL Draft, including 3 of the guys, each being mocked to the Commanders at 7, and Caleb Downs, Orville Reese, and Sonny Styles. And we now welcome back Doug to talk Carnell Tate. Nice to talk to you again, Doug. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me out.
By the way, this Ohio State class for the 2026 NFL Draft, the realistic possibility of 4 of the top 10 picks being Ohio State players. Are we looking at perhaps the greatest Ohio State NFL Draft class ever?
Yeah, it's especially like you said, that top group. In 2016, they had, I think Joey Bosa went 3, Ezekiel Elliott went 4, Eli Apple went 10. They had like 5 or 6 first round draft picks that year. They've had other great classes, but I think when you think like long term, that this top 5 group, and especially the top 4, again, if they could have 4 of the top 10 picks, will be among the best Ohio State draft classes ever. And then, like, from an Ohio State fan perspective, it's like, and they didn't win the national title? Like, what happened? They have all, and they still have Jeremiah Smith, who's not eligible for this draft, who's going to be a top 5 pick next year. So, this was a very talented group, though, for sure.
Okay, so Carnell Tate, the latest well-regarded Ohio State receiver in an NFL draft, it is becoming impossible to keep track of all of the great NFL receivers who went to Ohio State, which has become Receiver U. How would you compare Tate with other recent highly talented Ohio State receivers?
Yeah, so there was a coach, Ohio State, when they played Penn State this year, and Terry Smith was the interim Penn State head coach at the time after James Franklin got fired. He's a receivers coach. He knows receivers. And he said, there have been all these great Ohio State receivers that have come out, through the years. We've seen them all. These are the best 2. And it's Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith. So the way to judge Carnell Tate, I think, is that Jeremiah Smith, who again is going to be a junior at Ohio State in 2026, and then probably a top 3 pick in the NFL draft in 2027. Jeremiah Smith comes out in 2024 as a true freshman, super impactful. 2025, is he the best player in college football? Like, that's the conversation around Jeremiah Smith. And there reached a point during this 2025 season where we asked ourselves, is it simultaneously true that Jeremiah Smith is the best player in college football, the best receiver in Ohio State history, but also not as good as Carnell Tate? Like, this is what Carnell Tate was doing. So that Jeremiah Smith is setting a new standard for Ohio State receivers. We know what Marvin Harrison Jr. just did. We know Emeka Egbuka just had a great rookie year. We saw Jackson Smith and Jigba was the driving force of a Super Bowl champion offense. All these guys. But Jeremiah Smith, and I'm talking about Jeremiah Smith for a reason. Jeremiah Smith is like the end game. You cannot get better than Jeremiah Smith. And watching Carnell Tate on the field this year, you would have asked yourself, are we sure who the number 1 receiver is? Like, that's how good Carnell Tate was. So he played some as a sophomore, was a star, got hurt, missed 3 games at the end of the year, was playing hurt, I think, when he came back for the Michigan game, the Indiana Big Ten championship game, the Miami playoff game. But if you go back, they both had more than 120 receiving yards in a win over Penn State. But Carnell Tate, deep ball, leaping ability at the catch point, very good route runner, but I think maybe the best hands that I've ever seen in an Ohio State receiver. Just incredibly soft, pillowy hands that make every catch look easy. But I think absolutely can be like that big-time deep ball threat. He had a highlight this year, goes up between 2 guys in the end zone and hauls in a touchdown pass. That was one of the plays of the year. But he also can catch a 7-yard slant and turn it into a 40-yard gain. So true number 1 receiver. And none of us expected that anybody could be as good as Jeremiah Smith, and Carnell Tate, when he was healthy this year, looked like he was right at that level.
It's amazing to hear you talk about Carnell Tate as you just did, given, again, all of the current high-level NFL receivers who went to Ohio State. But it sounds like he has the potential to be among the best of the bunch, maybe the best of the bunch.
Yeah, I really like Garrett Wilson, another guy at Ohio State, first round pick of the Jets, like hasn't quite worked out as the Jets have had trouble finding a quarterback for him. That kind of next level athleticism that I always felt like Garrett Wilson, like super explosive, kind of like jump out of the gym elevate at the catch point kind of thing. That's where Carnell Tate is to me. And certainly can accelerate and pull away from guys. And again, some of his, that he was so incredible. I think he caught 70% of the deep balls they threw to him this year, which is just it's an insane number, right? It's like you just throw it up and let Carnell Tate go get it, and you realize that he's going to win that. But also a complete receiver too. So, there have been guys. I think at times I've seen Ohio State receivers that I thought like, oh man, maybe I think people might be overdrafting them a little bit. But also like a guy like Michael Thomas, who for a couple years there with the Saints was the best receiver in the NFL. He was a second-round pick. I thought people were crazy to not take Michael Thomas in the first round. And I think Carnell reminds me a little bit of him. Again, just like very polished and professional with the great hands. But then Carnell probably has, beyond Michael Thomas, has more of that take the lid off kind of thing where he can absolutely beat you down the field. So if you want a number one receiver, no hesitation that Carnell Tate fits that mold.
Much more with Doug Lesmerises in moments, but here is an outstanding book for you if you're a Washington fan or for a Washington fan who you care about. RFK All Access by Scott Cunningham, who served as a photographer for NFL properties for years and who photographed the Redskins extensively during their glory days in the 1980s and early 1990s. Scott, via RFK All Access, has put together a compilation of his best Redskins photos, many of which are behind-the-scenes photos. Joe Gibbs, Jack Kent Cooke, Richie Pettibone, the Hogs, the Posse, Sonny Sam and Frank, all, and so many more are featured in this book, which is 392 pages of glorious Skins history, 5 pounds of Redskins gold. If you are a serious Washington fan, if you are a Skins historian, this book is a must-have. Makes for a terrific addition to any Skins-themed man cave. Also makes for a great gift. I have the book. It is sensational. Heck, this is a book that has been endorsed by Joe Gibbs himself. Quote, "This is a great book filled with great memories," end quote. The book now is available in ebook form, and the book now is available for an all-time low price. Take advantage of this special sale in honor of Washington's offseason. RFK All Access. You can get the book by visiting rfkallaccess.com. And when you order the book, mention in the notes section that Al Galdi sent you. Doing that helps out this podcast a lot. That's rfkallaccess.com, rfkallaccess.com, and mention that Al Galdi sent you. We're getting great insight on Ohio State receiver Carnell Tate as a potential target for the Washington Commanders with their number 7 overall pick in the 2026 NFL Draft, as we speak with Ohio State football insider Doug Lesmerises of Bill and Doug on Ohio State football on Substack. Doug also is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show podcast. We know how star receivers can be. Is there any diva to Carnell Tate?
No. A lot of concern. So, like for Ohio State fans, Jackson Smith-Njigba, his last year at Ohio State, got hurt in the opener and had some hamstring injuries, like was out, tried to come back, re-aggravated the hamstring, and then just never played. Like it was a completely lost year. And when Carnell Tate got hurt, a lot of Ohio State fans were concerned about, is that going to be it for him? And from the standpoint of, yes, he's legitimately hurt, but also when you are a future first-round draft pick in the NFL, are you going to say, I can't risk it, I'm going to shut it down, that's it? And Ohio State fans were on pins and needles about that. And then he came back and caught a touchdown pass in the Michigan game, which, as everybody knows, is the most important game of the year for Ohio State. They'd lost 4 straight games to Michigan. They had to beat Michigan this year, and Carnell Tate came back and played when certainly there, I don't know in the end if it was any kind of legitimate concern, but it's just the realistic idea of when you're going to be a millionaire, are you going to risk it? You're getting paid with NIL now, but it's different. And then I don't know if everyone knows this story. It's just a tragic story. Carnell Tate's mother was murdered while he was at Ohio State in the city of Chicago. She was killed in a shooting. And so like, this is a kid who has overcome the worst kind of personal tragedy, and then had this situation, right, where he could have sat out and instead came back and played for his team. And so like not that in him. Like I think rock solid dude who's overcome a lot to succeed at the highest level. So like you'd be getting a good guy with Carnell Tate.
Why has Ohio State become so prolific at producing NFL receivers?
So that's what's going to be tested now, because the driver of it is that their receivers coach was Brian Hartline, who was a former Ohio State receiver, played in the NFL, had a 1,000-yard receiving season with the Miami Dolphins, and he had been Ohio State's receivers coach since 2018. And that's kind of where, like, this is where the run really starts, right? So like Terry McLaurin, for instance, like was before Brian Hartline, but when we're getting into the Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Emeka Ibuka, Marvin Harrison Jr., Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, it's Brian Hartline that they brought in immense talent. Even Jamison Williams with the Detroit Lions now started at Ohio State, kind of played some, did start, but push came to shove and he wanted the ball more and he went to Alabama, became a first-round pick. Like Ohio State kind of didn't have room for Jamison Williams, right? It's crazy. So Hartline just developed this relationship as a former NFL receiver, as a former Buckeye, great technician, great relationships, and just built this receiver room where he could just keep bringing in talent, and guys wanted to compete against each other, right? Like they wanted to be pushed. They wanted to be surrounded by great players, even if they had to wait their turn. So, and now he left. He went to be the head coach at South Florida. So this in 2026 will be the first time, in 8 years, Ohio State hasn't had Brian Hartline as their receivers coach. So that's what everybody's wondering. Like, are they going to keep it up? Ryan Day is the head coach, runs an NFL style offense. They always have great quarterbacks. He wants to throw the ball. That will continue. But Hartline's made a conveyor belt of NFL receivers here.
Just out of curiosity, the Commanders' number one receiver, Terry McLaurin, who the Redskins took in the third round of the 2019 NFL Draft out of Ohio State, did you think that he'd be as good in the NFL as he has ended up being?
I think we thought he'd be good, like super professional, got caught up. They just had they were rotating a bunch of receivers back then, little iffy on the quarterback play. I don't know that I thought for sure he'd be a number one, but he's such a good guy, and he was fast, and they didn't throw him the ball that much because they had such like a weird group of guys then. I certainly would not have anticipated this, but I'm also not that surprised because I thought he had it in him.
Yeah, and Terry McLaurin in so many ways is the anti-diva star receiver.
No, I always thought that with Terry, that he was incredibly grounded. And again, like he came in, he was kind of an underrated guy. He had to fight for his scholarship offer at Ohio State. So he kind of always had that, like, he was like a real dude. So
what's funny, too, is that Terry McLaurin wasn't even the first Ohio State receiver taken in the 2019 NFL Draft. The Indianapolis Colts took Paris Campbell in the second round of that draft, and he has had a very underwhelming NFL career.
Yeah, that's one of those. Again, like Paris is sort of like a rare size speed combo, but certainly not the natural receiver that Terry was. So like that was one of those, again, where it's like if I was advising an NFL team, I probably would have said, you might want to take Terry McLaurin first. I know Paris is fast, but Terry's a receiver, so.
Ohio State football insider Doug Lesmerises of Bill and Doug on Ohio State football on Substack. Doug also is the co-host of the Bill and Doug Show podcast. Doug, thanks. All the best.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Hey, if you are planning a wedding or you know someone who is, check out or have that person check out cateringbyuptown.com. Catering by Uptown delivers not just delicious food of the highest quality, but also a flawless and memorable experience tailored to your special day. Catering by Uptown's team is dedicated to meeting your every need with elegance and precision. If you visit cateringbyuptown.com and click on venues, you can set up your own personal tour of one of Catering by Uptown's premier venues, including outstanding waterfront venues. Also, Catering by Uptown is great for parties, so whether a birthday, an anniversary, a retirement, or a charity gala. Catering by Uptown understands that special events deserve to be celebrated in style. Catering by Uptown takes care of every detail so that you can enjoy your event. Catering by Uptown is a family business. It is run by the Pereiras, so they are great Commanders fans and loyal supporters of this podcast. Visit cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. That's cateringbyuptown.com and make sure that you mention that Al Galdi sent you. The post-Olympics break portion of the NHL's 2025-2026 regular season will begin on Wednesday night, including the Washington Capitals hosting the Philadelphia Flyers Wednesday night at 7. In the just-concluded Winter Olympics in Italy, what officially was the Olympic Winter Games Milano Cortina 2026, had NHL players playing in an Olympics for the first time since 2014. 3 Caps players played in the Olympics, so winger Tom Wilson and goaltender Logan Thompson played for Canada, which won the silver medal. Defenseman Martin Fehervary played for Slovakia, which came in 4th. Of course, it was our country, the United States of America, that won the gold medal via a thrilling 2-1 overtime win over Canada on Sunday morning. 46 years to the day of the U.S.'s last gold medal in Olympics men's hockey, the Miracle on Ice on February 22nd, 1980. But as for the Caps in the NHL's 2025-2026 regular season, so they are 29-23-7, good for 65 points, tied with the Columbus Blue Jackets for 4th place in the 8-team Metropolitan Division. But the Caps have played 3 more games than the Blue Jackets have played, so the Caps truly are in 5th place in the Metro. The Caps started off 17-9-2, then over their next 26 games went just 8-13-5, but then over the team's final 5 games before the Olympics break went 4-1-0. The Caps are 4 points behind the Boston Bruins for the Eastern Conference's second of 2 wildcard spots in the Stanley Cup playoffs, and looming is the 2026 NHL Trade Deadline, which is on Friday, March 6th, at 3 p.m. Eastern. I'm very pleased to welcome back to the Al Galdi podcast Peter Hassett, co-founder of the great cap site Russian Machine Never Breaks, RMNB. You can follow Peter on X at Peter Hassett. Peter is terrific at talking caps, so understands hockey analytics very well. Hey, Peter, how are you?
I am wonderful. It's a blast to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, very nice to talk to you. Before we talk caps, if you are NHL Commissioner Gary Bettman, would you continue to have NHL players participate in Olympics, or is the cost in terms of having to pause your season for multiple weeks and not have an NHL All-Star weekend and risk injuries for star players not worth the marketing upside?
I think the if I'm Gary Bettman part is what really complicates things. If I was interested in growing the game of the NHL, absolutely, without a doubt, no question. That they may lose Sidney Crosby for a length of time after the knee injury he suffered could be substantially changing their calculation of whether it's worth it or not. But there's no bigger stage, there's no better opportunity to grow the audience of the NHL. And they've got a really strong track record of blowing that opportunity over the last couple of decades. The NHL is growing, but not nearly at the same pace of the big 3 U.S. sports. And it's because they've sort of fumbled opportunities like this one.
All right, so with our Caps, simple question, perhaps a complicated answer. Are the Caps this season good?
Man, if you asked me in November, I'd be like, of course, they're a top 3 cup contender team. And that would have been true at that point. It is not true at all recently. I think primarily on the strength of special teams, which are both very, very weak. The Capitals are a middling team. They're a coin toss to make the playoffs, but they're a pretty good 5-on-5 team. They're okay at controlling the flow of play. And they have maybe some trouble finishing, and they've got awesome goaltending. And even with a mixed result of special teams, that's often enough to be called good. But they've also had some trouble with goal sequencing, meaning losing a lot of 1-goal games and the games they are winning and being in blowouts. So not a clear answer. And right now, as a person who's watching those games, I'm not having the most fun watching them. So we're going to go with not super great. No.
The Caps for this regular season are number 26 out of 32 NHL teams in power play efficiency, 16.38%, and are number 20 out of 32 NHL teams in penalty kill efficiency, 78.95%. The penalty kill has gotten better, but the power play remains bad. Bottom line, why have Caps special teams been so bad for so much of this season?
I'll say everyone disagrees, and even my colleagues at the site, we have different takes on what we think is going wrong. A lot to me, a lot of things come down to zone entries, or really zone exits and getting through neutral in the first place. The team just wasn't was getting sort of turned away at the blue line or elsewhere in neutral too fast. And when they're in the zone, they're pretty good at chasing the puck and digging it out of the corners and getting some kind of movement going. Not the best at it. They also have been relying a little bit too much on Jacob Chikrin's high shot from like the high slot near to the blue line, which is awesome. But you can't really build a power play around that because it's just a low danger shot that one guy just happens to be a freak at doing. They haven't been getting, I know people might point to like Ovechkin not being mobile. I think the problem is primarily getting Ovechkin those opportunities, the looks that he would get over there, which had never been a function of him being mobile or not. I think it's just what's going on around them. Lastly, there's some really good players that they're just not giving opportunities on there. I think like Protas still doesn't get much power play time, which is bananas to me. On the PK, I think it's a personnel issue. I think that there's a number of players that the team sort of is resisting moving on from, which is unfortunate.
So it sounds like the power play problems are mostly about coaching and the penalty kill problems are mostly about personnel. Is that correct?
Yeah, in a nutshell, absolutely.
Special teams in the NHL matter, but they don't matter as much as 5-on-5 play, and the Caps, for much of this regular season, were doing very well in 5-on-5 play, though the numbers have slipped. The Caps, now for this regular season, per natural stat trick, are number 13 out of 32 NHL teams in 5-on-5 shot attempt percentage, 50.72%, so still upper half of the NHL. But what do you make of the Caps' 5-on-5 play this season, and why have the stats declined recently?
So it's a good question because the personnel hasn't changed significantly. And in fact, they're going to have Pierre-Luc Dubois come back, so maybe things will get even better soon. They have had a couple of the most dominant lines in the NHL. Like whatever line like Protas is on and Wilson is on, those players are just so huge that they dictate the play on ice. And as we go down the lineup, like even the Ovechkin line has been pretty strong. Sordiff, who had been on the Protas and Wilson line a little bit, had also been driving play pretty well. Dowd, who used to be in a role of getting crushed in shot attempts, but doing so from the defensive zone all the time, he was elevated for a while on the third line and doing okay in that. And then even if Ovechkin and Strome, when they were paired together, weren't putting the puck in the net, they were still on attack a lot, although Ovechkin was certainly very sheltered, like getting a lot of offensive zone starts. So their lines were all very functional, and they had a lot of really good puck movement from the rear guard players. I mean, Carlson's always been a good distributor, even if he drives people nuts on like puck defense and pinching at like high in the offensive zone. He's still good at the general flow of play. Chikrin has been one of the biggest like value adds for the Caps in a long time. All those guys are really good. Roy's a really good defensive blue line. Like he can end a defensive zone shift before it begins, which is really good. So they've got a lot of good sort of individual talent, and it's dropped off over time for reasons that I can't quite put my finger on, other than like malaise. And hopefully they can turn it around soon. But it is a little bit distressing that a team that was, I don't know, let's say like 55% in October, which is great. 50 is average. 55 is pretty awesome. If they were that in October and November, they're, 50.5 now, I would guess. And even they've probably been under 50% over the last 10, 20 games, I would say is safe to bet.
The grade 8 Caps winger Alex Ovechkin, age 40 season, but he for this regular season is number 2 on the Caps in goals with 22, is tied for number 3 on the Caps in assists with 26, is number 2 on the Caps in points with 48, is number 2 on the Caps in shots on goal, 164, is number 3 on the Caps in hits, 98. This is the final season of a 5-year, $47.5 million contract, to which the Caps re-signed Ovi in July 2021. What is your assessment of the season that Ovi is having?
I think his passing is awesome. I mean, at age 40, I say this as a person on the other side of age 40, I'm pretty good at moderating my expectations. So yeah, like I said before, he's not the most mobile character, but he can certainly have those like scoring streaks, which he has a few times that have been pretty nutty. And his passing talent has not dropped off one iota. He is still a world-class passer. It's his most underrated trait. And if you were to tell me, I know a lot of people might have said like preseason, Ovechkin just broke the record last year. He can do anything he wants. He could get 40 goals this year. I think like if he's on track for like 30, 31, which I bet is where he's at, That's still absolutely wonderful for a person of his age, his advanced, disgusting, decrepit age of 40.
Much more with Peter Hassett in moments, but if you enjoy this podcast, please consider giving it a 5-star rating, and please consider writing just like a 1 or 2 sentence review of the podcast saying that you like it. You on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify can both rate the podcast and write reviews. 5-star ratings are very much appreciated. Positive reviews are very much appreciated. More now with Peter Hassett, co-founder of the must-read Washington Capitals site Russian Machine Never Breaks, RMNB. The Caps' #1 goaltender, Logan Thompson, he for this regular season is number 3 among all qualified NHL goaltenders in goals saved above expected per MoneyPuck.com, 18.4. Are you surprised by how well he's doing this season?
That's a great question. I guess I shouldn't be. I am a little bit. I thought last season was maybe like a flukishly great career season. And the fact that he followed it up and has followed up by being the team's best player and most impactful player all season long, bailing them out of games that they had no business being in the first place. We're talking about games where he's like saving like 3 goals above expected. He's been wonderful. And another sort of a high value, low risk acquisition by the front office that they've made in previous years on the scale of like Jacob Chychrun and Dylan Strome, for example. He's absolutely wonderful. I don't know if he's like really in the Vezina chase anymore necessarily. But if he were playing, let's say over the last weekend, I have a feeling Canada might have won an Olympic gold medal rather than Jordan Binnington.
Yeah, I myself wondered about that. Statistically speaking, this season is a big-time drop-off between the Caps' #1 goaltender Logan Thompson and the Caps' #2 goaltender Charlie Lindgren. As the Caps make a run for the postseason, do they need to lean heavily on Thompson? In other words, can Lindgren be trusted this season?
Yeah, Lindgren had a really good peak 2 years ago and has dropped off since. And if you were to like say where his true talent level is, I think probably even in that season, we would have been a bit too rosy optimistic to think that what he was putting up back then is like indicative of what he can do going forward. And since then, we've seen 2 down seasons. I don't think he's been a catastrophe. And I don't even think like he's of like a level where at the deadline they should look for an upgrade, for example, unless Logan Thompson's hurt. But it does look like what might have ever been considered a 1A, 1B can't be considered anything close to that anymore. I still think he's a perfectly good backup goalie, and I think it would be a waste of effort to like look for like an upgrade at the deadline.
Which players on the Caps most need to step up?
Really simply, Trevor Van Riemsdyk was a defender who could be relied on to do a whole lot and free up the rest of the offense, the rest of the blue line to get a little bit more aggressive. And he's had a big drop off. And I wonder if it's perhaps age related, which is, I think, very unfortunate. This is up on the forwards. Justin Sourdif has like just started scoring, and a lot of his underlying talents have been really strong so far, but he hadn't put like boxcar stats with those. I'm really interested and eager and rooting for him to show what he can do. Brendan Duhaime has had a significantly down season. He's played apart from Nick Dowd more than he has in any of his recent seasons. Those 2 guys had just been like the 4th liners who got the worst shifts possible. And he's been apart from Dowd, but even when he is with Dowd, he's really struggling. Like we're talking like low 40s in the percentage of shots that the Capitals possess when he's on the ice. And lastly, this one's not fair, but Pierre-Luc Dubois, and he hadn't played. I think he just played the first 6 games of the season. Then I think he came back right before the Olympic break. He's probably a top 10 player in the NHL last season as far as like impact players in improving their teammates around them. And if he can have that impact, even if it's in 15 to 17 to 18 minutes a night for the rest of the season, that'll be a huge change from what we've seen over the last 40 games.
Regarding the 2026 NHL Trade Deadline, which is coming up Friday, March 6th at 3 p.m. Eastern, should the Caps be aggressive buyers? Is this season's Caps team not worthy of aggressive buying? What is the right approach for President of Hockey Operations Brian McClellan and Senior Vice President and General Manager Chris Patrick?
I'm going to give you the answer that's sideways to the question you asked, which is if this is Alex Ovechkin's last season, and we should assume it is, what do they owe Ovechkin for that final run? And I think the answer is loading the heck up. And there's a lot of opportunity for like marginal improvements. Hendrix Lapierre as an experiment has not worked out. Brandon Neuhaim on the depth. Those are like highly fungible players. You can move those guys and swap them out. But if they need a real big impact player, somebody who's available, I think people are saying like Jordan Kyrou or something like that. I love an Olympic snub, Jason Robertson. I think he'd be amazing on this roster, but he's very expensive, and Dallas Stars may not want to part with him at all. But those are like some big names that would represent the level of aggression, the level of like ambition for Alex Ovechkin's final season that would have felt like, yeah, of course we need to push in October and November. And now, because the team had been middling for a while, they may be a little gun shy. I don't think they should be.
Are the Caps, in terms of younger players, well positioned for the future?
I think that their prospects are pretty strong. Ryan Leonard I'll say like he has like an incomplete game, but the parts that he does have, i.e. like annoying the hell out of opponents, drawing penalties at a level that like rookies just don't do. It's really good. Justin Sordoff is a young player who's got a lot of promise, who can do good stuff. I know we don't think of him like this because he came from elsewhere, but like Dylan Strome's still pretty young. Like those are all, good players. And then, the farm is looking very good. Now, when you go back onto like defense, there needs to be an infusion of youth there, especially as like John Carlson reaches the end of his contract here. Martin Ferrivari has been great, and he's still relatively young. So yeah, I think the Caps have a pipeline that's probably stronger than a lot of other teams. I'm sure that like the Pittsburgh Penguins would swap with the Capitals in youth talent any day of the week, but that doesn't mean that they don't have improvements that they need to make as some of these older players roll off the roster.
If you had to give Caps head coach Spencer Carbery a grade for his work so far this season, what would that grade be?
Whatever it was, it's dropping. So I think honestly, it has to be a C. In the first couple of months, like I said a dozen times already, like unimpeachable performance. But the longer that they've gone without making changes to the power play, and maybe Kirk Muller's job entirely, which I assume is a higher fire control that Spencer Carbery has. And also the sort of tediously unchanging status of a fourth line that's getting 6-7 minutes a night that's just poor bench management. So even if other things are going great, the fact that those problems have lingered for so long makes you wonder what the decision-making process is and why aren't they executing on what I'm sure they know is a problem as well.
Well, this is Spencer Carbery's third season as Caps head coach. The man who he replaced as Caps head coach, Peter Laviolette, he lasted for 3 seasons as Caps head coach. We know how frequently most NHL teams change head coaches. Could Carbery's job be on the line the rest of this season? Like, could we be in for a surprise firing if the Caps don't make the playoffs?
I think things would have to go really bad for him to be on the hot seat. But if there isn't momentum upwards next season, yeah, for sure, there'll be a different look. And I wonder if the calculus about how they evaluate their front office and staff and other players changes in the post-Ovechkin era, if that indeed is where we're headed.
That's a great point. Peter Hassett, co-founder of the terrific Washington Capitals site Russian Machine Never Breaks, RMNB. Peter, thanks. All the best.
Thank you, Al.
And that'll do it for you and me for now. Keep the feedback coming. You can hit me up on X at Al Galdi. You can email me the Al Galdi podcast at yahoo.com. Wednesday show, episode 1268, will include a lot for you on the Washington Commanders, as we on Tuesday afternoon have press conferences for General Manager Adam Peters and Head Coach Dan Quinn at the 2026 NFL Scouting Combine at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Peters Tuesday at noon, Quinn Tuesday afternoon at 3. Also on Wednesday's show, I'll talk talk Washington Wizards in college basketball. The Wizards are at the Atlanta Hawks Tuesday night at 7:30. Georgetown is home to Marquette Tuesday night at 7. Number 11 Virginia is home to NC State Tuesday night at 7. And George Washington is at LaSalle Tuesday evening at 6:30. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
Do you know who I am?
No, I can't say that I do.
I don't know how to put this, but I'm kind of a big deal.
Really?
People know me.